Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Now, today I'm going to respond to questions that I've received in regards to the solar plexus and the emotional wave, specifically to a awesome Instagram follower by the name of Andrea. So just in case you don't want me to say your surname, I won't. But Andrea, you know who you are. And the message that Andrea sent me in regards to the emotional or the specifically emotions with a defined solar plexus were, she asked me to, let's just stop and start all that again. I'm trying too hard. I'm just getting comfortable. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's podcast. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit more deeply about the emotional solar plexus. We're also going to talk a little bit about emotions because a lot of what we're experiencing in the world right now is this amplification of healing. We are the generations that are bridging the gap from the old way to the new way. And what we're hearing so much of is this ancestral healing. And a lot of the way we actually heal comes down to a very, very simple thing. And that is the ability to feel our emotions, allowing us to process them and ultimately let them go. Okay. So from a healing point of view, we really have this opportunity right now because we are literally healing hand over fist. Everything is so much easier. I even think, at the beginning of my journey in my late 20s, I would be doing a lot of this work and shadow work and meditation and seeing, small incremental improvements. Whereas even in my journey today, after all the healing and all the shadow work and all the deconditioning that I've done, often even now that, not dealing with really big, chunky, meaty things that I did more so in my 30s, I'm still seeing, quantum leaps, big changes, big shifts in my external reality. So, and from, less effort. Now, what I want to really talk about today, I've had a couple of questions come in via Instagram, and one specifically from Andrea. And Andrea really asked, how do we deal with guilt and shame of the emotions? Now, this is really, really important point. What we need to understand is that through the frame of human design, we say that we are either emotional or non-emotional. Through the frame of human behavior, we are all emotional. But what human design gives us is how specifically we're going to experience emotions, okay? We all have our own emotions, whether we are emotional or non-emotional, defined by human design. But the specific difference is that if we are an emotional being, we will always experience emotion. An emotional wave will always be present within our life, no matter where we're at, no matter what consciousness we're at, no matter how much healing we've done. And that mechanical wave can be manipulated. It can be, increased or decreased, but it's always going to be there. When we're a non-emotional being, what happens is that you actually have the potential to be a very emotionally balanced person. So what that means is that you will tend, and the more you understand your design and the more you learn not to identify with other people's emotions, and the more you respond to people that are emotional or big emotions with a detachment, that this is not your energy, that you can hold space for this energy, or you can ask questions, or you can guide, or you can support, but it's not yours, and it's not your responsibility do anything with it, then you're going to find that you start to experience life in a lot more emotionally balanced way. Now, from my experience as an emotional being, we can also experience a more emotionally balanced life when we do the work, when we understand that we will always have the influence of this mechanical wave within us. Now, that's going to show up in a lot of different ways. One that you may have heard me speak about a bit is when I was doing a lot of my training to certify as a master coach, we did a lot of NLP. My certifications, it's called metadynamics, but really it's NLP. And I would see massive transformations happening in front of me, and my transformations would take more time. And it was only years later, when starting to dive into my HD experiment, that I went, oh my goodness, it's my emotional wave. So wherever I was on my wave was having a bigger or a lesser impact on the transformation through the tool of NLP. So over the years, what's happened is that because I've learnt the really big distinctions, and these are the distinctions that I discovered while running my experiment, and now I've worked with so many, hundreds, maybe even thousands of clients now on this, to really manage two things. The first is don't indulge in your emotions, meaning that if you're upset or you're feeling something, it's okay to share that. But if you're sharing it 2, 3, 4, 5 times over and over and over, that's indulging the emotion, and it's keeping you in the emotional low, and you're getting something from it. Okay. Whereas if you're choosing to experience the emotion, share the story, and then just let that wave continue to move, then you're going to find that you don't have so much drama. You don't have so much consistent ongoing emotion. It will calm that wave. Now, on the other side of that, we're talking about your repressing it. So, and I've done both of these. So in my early days, I repressed up until my early 20s. I repressed all of my emotions. So what would happen is that I would be fine, then something would happen, and it would be so hard to not cry or not react, that like I just couldn't keep a lid on it anymore, and I would explode. And as a kid, I found that very embarrassing, because sometimes that would happen at school. And then I was so afraid of being the crybaby, or, being overly sensitive. And as you've heard my journey with that, like I'm also a highly sensitive person. So I learned to repress them early. Then once I'd effectively learned how to do depression, I indulged. So my wave was really, really big. But once I understood about not indulging, not repressing, and allowing the wave to be, game changer. My wave now is nowhere near as extreme as it once was. Even going through this process, for those of you that have been paying attention, I've been doing keto, and with the intention to balance my hormones. And even that has made a significant difference, balancing my hormones. So let's talk about guilt and shame. And I feel like I've kind of touched on it, but let's talk about guilt and shame with emotions. As an emotionally defined person, what you will probably find is that you're afraid of expressing your emotions because, like me, you're embarrassed. You don't want to be called oversensitive. You don't want to be the crybaby. They're all the things that I would tell myself when I was younger, or I was weak because I showed emotion. And one of the things that I want you to become aware of is that this is the conditioning. Okay. A lot of us, if you're of my generation, so you're a generation, Gen X or just below us, even the Gen Ys, like really you're in this place where you have probably grown up in a place where it's not okay to be emotional. So you've learnt to guilt, judge, criticize, and shame your emotions, which actually adds to the amplification of the wave. It's like a catch-22, right? when we actually learn to let go of the guilt and shame that we have about our emotions, then something really magical starts to happen. Because every single one of us who's decided to come to planet Earth this time with a defined solar plexus has come with the intention to become emotionally intelligent, to really understand what it means to be emotional. And ultimately, if we want to simplify that, what that means is we've come here to learn how to feel. Many of us, if you're like me, literally turned off feeling. And you guys have heard the stories before. I turned off feeling so much in my physical body that I broke my arm as a kid and I didn't feel it. When I had my first son, no one thought I was actually going to have a baby because I didn't look like I was in enough pain. All of these things. There's been so many times in my life that I've like literally shut down physical feeling in my body because I don't want to have these emotions that as a child I was scared of expressing publicly, and even to my mother to a degree, because she's a very stoic, non-emotional person. So this is the thing I want you to understand, is that the judgment, the criticism, the shame that you pour on yourself is a learnt behavior. You've actually come here to be incredibly wise about emotion and feeling. And we're moving into this time where we're connecting through the solar plexus to our spiritual consciousness through this form of feeling. And we have to go this road through emotion so that we can start to feel the energy of the guidance, like intuition. It's almost like it's the bridge to really understanding how we can feel our intuition. Even to the point where we will get to a place where we won't need to speak out loud. We'll have like mental telepathy, but it's a feeling. Like that language is a feeling of the energy. So we're in this process of everyone learning how to feel. And the first way we're doing it significantly is through the emotions, whether we're emotional or emotional. It is all in the for the mission of learning how to feel. So if you are a person that's experiencing this judgment or shame or criticism of your emotions, then it really is time to do things like your shadow work, which you can jump on the HD shadow program that I will be launching very soon, waitlist in the show notes. But if you're feeling a lot of shame around those emotions, expressing those emotions, maybe you're even calling people into your life that judge you for your emotions, because of course our relationships are mirrors of what's going on inside of us, then this means it's time for you to do your healing. It's time for you to understand the power that lies in your emotions and this important role that, whether you're emotional or non-emotional, this important job that the solar plexus is playing in teaching us all how to feel. I love how like Jenny Crowther, whenever her solar plexus gets switched on, I will often get a message and she'll be like, oh my goodness, I don't know how you do this. It's exhausting. But, so whether you're emotional or non-emotional, there's so many gifts and lessons in this experience. And as I said, simplifying it right down to feeling. Now, the other question or the other thing I really wanted to cover is before we go to another question that I really loved, is I want you to understand that your emotions unchecked, and I believe it was David Hawkins that talks about this. Your emotions, when they're unchecked, so this is what I would call indulging in them, you literally are leaking energy everywhere. This is a way that we can exhaust ourselves. We can get way too entangled in other people's energy. We lose our energetic boundaries, and we stop ourselves from recharging our energy. So I want you to understand that whether you're emotional or non-emotional, it's really important that this the amplification or this amplification, or allowing yourself to indulge in your emotions in an unchecked way, is a way that you are leaking a lot of your energy. So with the more, the what we might call a non-energy type, like a non-energy projector, or even a projector, manifester, or the reflector, which is also a non-energy type. It's really important to understand that if you are indulging emotions, and the non-energy type is not going to have a defined solar plexus, but what I really want you to understand is that this is allowing your emotion, whether it's defined or undefined in the solar plexus, to be wild and unchecked, is leaking your energy. Now, for those of you that are saying, well, I need to feel my emotions. You've just said, Emma, that I need to feel them all the way through. Yes, but feeling them all the way through is not a story. It's not words. It's not something that comes from the mind. A feeling and an emotion is felt below the neck. It's felt in the body. And often what we're actually talking about, and in fact, I still do this today sometimes if I'm not conscious, but I used to do it a lot, is that you are thinking your emotions. You are not feeling them. And then the moment you feel them in your body, you get to interrupting them or changing them or fixing them. All of this is mental energy. This is not you feeling them. This is not you sitting in a room just letting that fear, just letting that shame, just letting that embarrassment be there. That's you trying to jump in and fix it or change it. Ultimately, the presupposition of someone doing that, so you're presupposing, if you're fixing something, that there's something wrong with you, that there's something wrong with the emotion. So this is why I want you to understand the distinction, that when we let our emotions be unchecked, or we overindulge in them, or even repress them, this is a mental energy. The mind is involved. There are words, there are stories, there are meanings. When we are really feeling and processing our emotions, this is when it happens in the body. We feel it. We don't say it, we feel it. So this is something I want you to practice. I want you to practice that distinction, because often some of us that have really clever egos, our egos most of the time are actually thinking our feelings, not feeling our feelings. And that's when we're leaking our energy. That's when we're not actually processing what we need to process, because we're staying in our head, we're telling the stories, and we're trying to get something external of us to validate or to make us enough, or whatever the story is. So be really aware of that. Now, the next question I just want to address or respond to is from Emma, and she asks, where is it? Learn more about how somebody with emotional authority could step into their intuitive knowing. This is really cool, because we don't often talk about emotional authority and intuition, because a lot of the old school knowledge per se will say that you're only empathetic, you're only empathic or intuitive in undefined centers, which actually isn't always true as well. We would talk about a defined head or a defined ajna potentially being more intuitive. But within the solar plexus, this is, as I said earlier, the intuitive gift of the solar plexus is feeling. So it's that the clairsentience. I believe that's correct for all of those out there, if I've got it wrong. And it's the clair feeling. So for me personally, and when I first came to human design, I was a bit like, oh, it's so weird, because you're saying I'm not an emotional empath. I can't feel other people's emotions because I'm emotionally defined. Yet I walk past people in the street and know how they're feeling. Like, that's really weird. And then I started to understand that it's really different. Like, I don't feel other people's emotion as my emotion, but what I feel is I can feel into, more from an intuitive point of view, what people are feeling. And then my energy constructs that, almost feeds it back to me through my undefined head and ajna, or through my undefined spleen, or through my undefined G center. So although I know how people are feeling, that is a big way that I use my intuition. It's like I can tap into the way people feel, and the feedback comes back through my undefined or open centers. And when you have emotional definition, intuition is very much about feeling. So for those of you that have been on live classes, especially these panels that are just amazing, we just did the Ajna panel and it was mind blowing. It was so good. And every time someone said something that my higher self was in agreement to, I would get goosebumps, or I would have some, energetic excitement question drop into my undefined ajna. And, I'm on it, so that's how I experience the intuition through a defined solar plexus. It's all about feeling. So get really clear on how you feel, and ask yourself better questions like, so through the frame of feeling, what are my intuitive gifts? And it's important to frame questions in that way because there's a presupposition. The question is presupposing that you feel your intuitive gifts. So your unconscious mind and higher self will come back with an answer because you're already saying, I know I have these gifts and I know it's through feeling, but I need to know specifically what they are. So that's going to help you tap into your intuitive gifts through the solar plexus. Now, if you're undefined, of course, you really will feel other people's emotion like it's your own. It'll be amplified. It will often feel too much if that person has unchecked emotions or is indulging in those emotions. And then it might also feel stuck if they're repressing, like you just know how they're feeling, but it just feels this awful stuck energy. And again, ask yourself really good questions. How specifically do I experience other people's emotions? How do I specifically feel them? And then you're going to get real time, you're your own guru, what's true for you, feedback and answers to support you with your intuition. So, Ama, I trust that answers your question. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to emotions, and this is true, you probably all hear me say this a few times. If you've worked with me, you've heard me say it. Basically, we all as human beings project our internal reality on other people. So whether you have a line 5 or a line 2, which has a projection field of its own, you're doing that and people are doing that to you. And when we're talking specifically through the frame of emotion, if you have an unprocessed emotion, you're going to see it in someone else. It's going to be a trigger, or it's going to be something you don't like, or it's going to be something that, when you see it in others, you cringe. So pay attention to the emotions that make you feel uncomfortable in others when they express them. And this kind of goes back to the first question, because if you have guilt and shame around failure and the emotion of feeling like, oh, I failed, then you're gonna be very sensitive to other people failing, or your perception of other people failing. For me, it used to be all about intelligence. So if I saw someone get embarrassed because they got a question wrong, that was it. Like I would go red. I would just have this wash of like embarrassment. But it was because it was in me. So pay attention to the emotions you see in the world that trigger an emotional response in you, because that is something telling you that you have an unhealed emotion or an emotion that wants to be processed and felt. Often when people do shadow work, the fear around shadow work isn't actually the emotions. They think it is. They're like, oh my God, I don't want to feel all that, but it's not, it's the stories. It's like people don't want to face their stories. They don't want to face their ego. The actual feeling of emotion isn't that dramatic unless we've built this huge ego story around it that makes it so, the emotion itself so huge. But once we go down this process and we look in the mirror and we look at our ego and we allow our body to feel our emotions to their entirety, we all of a sudden realize that the ego's been holding this power over us and there's nothing to fear. So pay attention, allow yourself to feel your emotions, feel them in your body, not in your mind. And be okay with expressing what you need to express, but don't indulge, don't amplify, don't create stories and meanings that are only going to get you stuck. What I want you to do with your, whether you're defined or undefined in the solar plexus, like ask yourself better questions. How specifically do I experience feeling intuition with emotions in my body? How do I feel other people's emotions? What is standing in the way of me deeply feeling my emotions? Ask yourself great questions, become your own guru, and discover what is true for you. All right, beautiful humans. I trust that was of value. I'm so grateful that you've all been here. Thank you to everyone who is leaving 5-star reviews and reviews. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Bye for now.